It's such a privilege to introduce Dr. Michael Greger, someone whose work has transformed countless lives. Dr. Greger is joining us virtually from the US, on the East Coast this time, where it's just 9 a.m., early for many, but he's already brimming with energy he's known for. Several years ago, I had the chance to meet Dr. Greger briefly at a plant-based healthcare conference in San Diego, California. That conversation left a lasting impression and indirectly brought him here with us today. Dr. Greger's journey into medicine was inspired by witnessing his grandmother's dramatic recovery from terminal heart disease through dietary change. Her story stands in sharp contrast to my father's experience. After years of food indulgence and cigar smoking, he was Cuban. He suffered a life-altering stroke that deeply impaired him in his final 10 years of life. Both experiences, though, highlight the profound impact of lifestyle choices on health. Dr. Greger is a physician, internationally recognized speaker, and founder of nutritionfacts.org. Some of you may know that. An invaluable resource for evidence-based nutrition science. He's the best-selling author of How Not to Die, How Not to Diet, and one of his latest books and the topic of today's talk, How Not to Age. A graduate of Tufts University School of Medicine, his work continues to inspire patients and healthcare professionals worldwide. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Greger.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but maybe next year. Why do some people live to be 100 and others not? Well, it isn't just a matter of picking better parents. Studies following identical twins suggest only about 25% of the variation in lifespan between people is explained by genetics. What can we do over the majority of which we may have some control? Well, the media loves stories of hard-living centenarians who attribute their longevity to some combination of lard vodka and favorite brand of cigarette. But how do the oldest and healthiest really eat and live? That's what we have the blue zones for, these areas of exceptional longevity around the world, where they may have up to 10 times the rates of those reaching triple digits. What lessons can we learn? Well, the Blue Zones organization distilled findings from more than 150 dietary surveys from the world's longest living people to create a set of 10 food guidelines. The foundation of the Blue Zones food guidelines is to make your diet at least 95% plant-based, avoiding highly processed foods, emphasizing beans as the healthiest source of protein, water as the best beverage, and nuts as the healthiest snack. That's the foundation. The final 5 guidelines are to go easy on fish, eliminate eggs, slash sugar, reduce dairy, and retreat from meat. There are a number of shared Blue Zone lifestyle characteristics, avoiding smoking, daily exercise, but plant-based nutrition appears to be the principal component. No surprise, because according to the most comprehensive and systematic analysis ever undertaken on the causes of death, a suboptimal diet is humanity's greatest killer, responsible for more deaths than any other risks, including tobacco. That is however, not the case in Sweden, where tobacco kills more people still than the Swedish diet. Did my slides just disappear? They're back. We are what we eat, but which is good news because it means we have the power. Changing from a typical diet to a better diet starting at age 20, be expected to increase the lifespan of women by 11 years, men by 13 years. The largest life expectancy gains would be made by eating more legumes. In other words, more beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils. If there's one thing we could eat legumes for longevity, hummus for health. Then comes whole grains and nuts and eating less meat. Now, for the few of us who aren't 20 anymore, not to worry. Starting to eat healthier at age 60 could still mean adding 8 or 9 years to our lifespan. Even starting as late as age 80 could add years, and it doesn't take much. The NIH AARP study is the largest forward-looking study on diet and health in human history, based on its 6 million person years of observation, replacing just 3% of daily caloric intake from animal protein with plant protein was associated with a 10% decreased risk of overall mortality. Just swapping 3%. Of all the animal protein sources, eggs were found to be the worst. Swapping in 3% of plant protein for egg protein was associated with twice the benefit, 20% lower mortality, having scrambled tofu instead. But does eating healthier actually slow down aging? Adopting a plant-based dietary pattern, especially when rich in healthful plant foods, is associated with a substantially lowered pace of aging, but you need interventional trials to show cause and effect, and here we go. Randomize hundreds of individuals to a diet centered around whole plant foods, or to exercise, or to neither. And though sadly the physical activity alone failed to slow the aging process, those in the plant-based dietary intervention group experienced a significant slowing of biological aging. I don't know how many people saw the new Netflix documentary about identical twins randomized, either a healthy or omnivorous diet versus a plant-based diet. But not only did the plant-based diet slow telomere loss, which was shown in the documentary, but subsequently, researchers actually measured the rate of aging, and within 8 weeks of eating more plants, there was a significant slowing in biological aging using multiple epigenetic aging clocks in just 8 weeks, aligning with the anti-aging effects of plant-based diets. In terms of lifespan, eating a burger may cut one's life as short as smoking 2 cigarettes. So if it wouldn't even occur to us to light up before and after lunch, maybe we should choose the bean burrito instead. Of course, it's not just about adding years to your life, but life to your years. An unhealthy aging index was devised to measure functional impairments, vitality, mental health, not just physical health, and substituting even just 1% of plant protein for animal protein appeared to lead to significantly less deficit accumulation, and substituting 5% may reduce our risk of dying from the greatest deficit of all, dementia. That may help explain why those who do not eat any meat at all may be up to 3 times less likely to become demented. But again, it's not all or nothing. In fact, the worst thing about humanity's diet is neither animal nor vegetable, but mineral, sodium. Happy to talk about it in Q&A, but basically we should switch from sodium salt, sodium chloride, to potassium salt, potassium chloride. I don't know if any of these brands are available where you are. What about fish? Unfortunately, our oceans have essentially become humanity's sewer. Everything eventually flows into the sea. So the consumption of contaminated seafood has become the main route of human exposure to chemical pollutants. Yes, a variety of foods are affected, but the number one source of DDT to this day, fish. Number one source of PCBs, fish. Salmon is the worst when it comes to PCBs, followed by canned tuna. Salmon also has the highest levels of dioxin-like compounds. So, on the one hand, fish has long been viewed as a healthy dietary component because of the long-chain omega-3s. But on the other hand, we have so polluted our world. We're now seeing heavy metals, pesticides, flame retardants in fish, forever chemicals, which may explain why, despite their omega-3s, there's been this failure to consistently observe beneficial effects of fish consumption. So if we had a time machine to go back before the Industrial Revolution, that would be one thing. But now, We have studies like this, where mice fed farmed salmon fillets with common levels of persistent organic pollutants were found to develop insulin resistance, glucose intolerance, abdominal obesity, fatty liver, chronic low-grade inflammation. So even just background levels of pollutants that might be presumed to be safe could completely counteract the potential benefits of the omega-3s, in particular leading to serious metabolic issues. Now, for mercury, it's more about brain function. Here in the States, hundreds of thousands of babies are born with brain damage every year as a consequence of their mothers consuming mercury-contaminated fish during pregnancy, with the resulting loss of intelligence estimated to cause billions of dollars of lost productivity every year. In the aging literature, there are cases like this: a man with years of progressive memory loss, tentatively diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. His friends and family assumed he was nearing the end of his life. But a detailed history revealed that he had consumed swordfish once or twice a week, and when the fish was removed from his diet, his mercury level fell and his memory bounced back. No more dementia. So it seemed he didn't have Alzheimer's after all, but rather mercury poisoning from just a handful of monthly meals of contaminated fish. You can see the same remarkable reversals with hair loss. Here's a common story. Perimenopausal woman seeks help for hair loss. Blood tests indicate elevated mercury levels. No wonder she had a diet high in tuna. But within 2 months of skipping the fish, her hair started to grow back, and eventually her hair regrew completely. So doctors should consider screening for mercury toxicity when they see hair loss, since there's something we can do about it. Instructing patients to reduce fish intake could offer relief of symptoms and uncover dietary habits that may be a source of heavy metal-induced hair loss. Though admittedly, sometimes heavy metal can lead to too much hair. Sorry. Happy to cover other foods and beverages in the Q&A, like what about green tea or red wine? But let's move on to part 3. What can we do to preserve our bones, bowels, bladder, and circulation, our hair, hearing, and hormone balance, immune function, joint health, sex life, and skin, mind and our muscles, teeth, vision, finally, our dignity and death? For example, did you know that 85% of age-related bone loss has nothing to do with bone mineral density? That's just been drilled into our heads by big pharma and a billion-dollar bone density screening industry. Fractures are primarily due to falling, not osteoporosis. So it's the age-related muscle loss and impaired balance that may be breaking most of our bones, which is good news because there's something we can do about it. 7 randomized controlled trials found that strength and balance training can cut fracture rates nearly in half, and that's just during the trial. In the 5 years after this 1-year study ended, those who had previously been randomized to the combined strength and balance group suffered 74% fewer fractures. That's far more effective than osteoporosis drugs like Fosamax that can cause fractures, atypical femoral fractures, as many as 1 in 300 users. Right? We, of course, call them atypical because they occur not after a fall or trauma, but just during routine activities like walking, twisting at the waist, even just standing still. Thanks to the drug, our femur, thigh bone, biggest bone in our body, just snaps in half. Too cruel an irony from a drug that's supposed to protect our bone. This is what it looks like on X-ray. This poor dude had both his femurs snap spontaneously. Ouch. After bones, I talk about preserving your bowel function in chapter number 2. Randomized constipated diabetics to either cookies containing a tablespoon a day of ground flax seeds or flax-free placebo cookies for 12 weeks. And not only did the flax improve constipation symptoms, but resulted in 8-pound weight loss of placebo. As you can see, that's 3.8 kilograms, a 25-point lower blood sugars, and astounding drop in hemoglobin A1C, 17-point lower LDL cholesterol. Sorry, I did not have those converted for you. All for about 10 cents a day of ground flax seeds. Bladder function. Prevalence of overactive bladder syndrome increases with age reaching 1 in 3. No wonder bladder-relaxing drugs are a multi-billion-dollar industry, yet may only reduce bathroom breaks compared to placebo by a half a pee a day. But a quarter teaspoon a day of dried cranberry powder worked nearly 4 times better, about 2 fewer daily trips to the bathroom over placebo, and that's without any of the drug side effects. Problems with dry mouth, constipation, sedation, cognition, retention, and vision, leading almost 2/3 of patients to stop taking these drugs, whereas cranberries are just, I don't know, tangy? Urinary incontinence is a common problem among older adults, particularly women, thanks to childbirth. Systemic menopausal hormone therapy like Premarin actually makes it worse, though local vaginal estrogen may help. What works 5 times better than estrogen cream, though? Kegel exercises, pelvic floor exercises, as I detail in my section. If 1,000 postmenopausal women take the standard hormone regimen for 10 years, you not only expect 876 extra cases of urinary incontinence that they wouldn't have had otherwise, but 9 more cases of invasive breast cancer, 8 more cases of heart disease, probably 22 more cases of dementia, 21 more cases of gallbladder disease, 9 more strokes, and 21 more blood clots, though not a single partridge nor pear tree. However, hormone therapy is highly effective for decreasing menopausal hot flashes. Is there any way to keep cool without the clots and cancer? Well, here in North America, menopausal hot flashes are considered inevitable, but there isn't even a word for hot flash in the Japanese language. This may be due to their higher consumption of soy foods, but you don't really know until you put it to the test. Harvard funded a randomized crossover trial of a half a cup of unsalted soy nuts a day and achieved, compared to the control group, a 40 to 45% reduction in hot flashes within 2 weeks. Given that a plant-based diet may also be effective for managing menopausal symptoms, researchers decided to combine the two, a plant-based diet and whole soybeans. In fact, 2 randomized controlled trials found that plant-based nutrition with a daily half cup of cooked whole soybeans, like out of a can, can reduce the number of serious hot flashes by 84 to 88%. Lots of other things can help. Whole fennel seeds powdered into capsules to pit them against placebo in a double-blind trial significantly improved menopausal symptoms at a dose of a teaspoon a day. Fenugreek, which may also help at a dose of a teaspoon and a half, though not as much as hormones, but without the side effects. Though fenugreek can make your pee smell like maple syrup. Sounds like a bonus. The nice thing about studying spices is that entire servings can be stuffed into pills, so you can do placebo-controlled trials. A quarter teaspoon of black cumin powder a day led to significant improvements in memory and other tests of cognition within 9 weeks compared to placebo. Black sesame seeds, less than a teaspoon a day of ground black sesame seeds stuffed into capsules against placebo, drove down systolic blood pressures by 8 points within a month. If sustained, that alone could decrease the risk of stroke by about a quarter, and is delicious. What else can we powder? Strawberries. Osteoarthritis patients were randomized to 2 ounces of freeze-dried strawberry powder versus a fake strawberry-flavored and colored placebo powder. And compared to placebo, the real strawberry significantly decreased constant pain, intermittent pain, and total knee pain, and improved disability and overall quality of life. The reason we care is that osteoarthritis is the most frequent cause of physical disability among older adults. Yet how do we treat it? Paracetamol, right? Acetaminophen, instead of the first-line painkiller. But guess what? It doesn't work. Much better than a sugar pill, but at least it's not going to make matters worse. Like other things the medical profession has cooked up, like steroid injections, which actively worsen joint deterioration and don't even offer better pain relief than placebos, or arthroscopic surgery, which may end up tripling our risk of ending up having to get a full knee replacement. I mean, so look, even if the strawberry study is some total fluke, what's the worst that can happen? Tastier smoothies? And less than a quarter of a teaspoon of ground ginger a day can beat out placebo for joint pain. Researchers conclude ginger is to be recommended as a safe drug for these patients, but by drug, they're just talking about a couple pinches of the ground ginger you can buy at any store. There was even a study on topical ginger, at least when applied to the scrotum. Paper-thin slices of ginger applied over the inflamed testicles, and the researchers were on the ball, healing nearly 3 times faster than the control group. Okay, so far I've touched on preserving your bones, bowels, bladder, hair, hormones, and joints, but preserving your mind is the largest chapter of the book, as dementia is one of our most pressing public health problems and most feared condition of later life. There's a common misconception we have no control over whether or not we develop dementia, but the good news is that although Alzheimer's may be incurable, at least it is preventable. I was surprised looking at Sweden's public health statistics that although heart disease is indeed killer number 1 of Swedish men and women, killer number 2, which in most other countries, cancer or stroke, killer number 2 in Sweden is Alzheimer's disease. There's an emerging consensus that what's good for our heart is good for our heads, because clogging the arteries inside the brain with atherosclerotic plaque is thought to play a role in the development of Alzheimer's dementia. This is what our cerebral arteries should look like: open, clean, allowing blood to flow throughout our brain. This is what atherosclerosis in our head looks like: clogged with cholesterol, closing off our arteries, clamping down on blood flow. What kind of brain arteries do you want in your head? Too much cholesterol in our blood is unanimously recognized to be a risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's disease. Those with a total cholesterol of 5.8 or more may have nearly 25 times the odds of ending up with amyloid plaques in their brains 10 to 15 years later. Cholesterol explains how the Alzheimer's gene ApoE4 ravages the brain. After all, what is ApoE? The Alzheimer's gene codes for the major cholesterol carrier in the brain. This may explain the so-called Nigerian paradox, where they have among the highest rates of the Alzheimer's gene, but some of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's disease. How is that possible? Well, genes load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Paradox may be explained by their low cholesterol levels, probably due to their diet low in animal fat. Human beings may have evolved to maintain an LDL cholesterol. Sorry, I don't know the conversion there. 25, average in the Western world, approximately 5 times that. No wonder heart disease is the leading cause of death in high-income countries. And indeed, like Sweden, killer number 2 is dementia across the board in high-income countries. That helps explain why the so-called Alzheimer's gene, the single most important gene when it comes to longevity too, which is good news, because even if we've been dealt some bad genetic cards, we still may be able to reshuffle the deck with diet. So, in terms of dietary guidelines for the prevention of Alzheimer's, we should center our diets around vegetables, legumes, fruits, and whole grains. In other words, the dietary pillar of lifestyle medicine, which is whole food, plant-based nutrition. But prevention isn't sexy. I mean, when prevention works, nothing happens. But the same plant-based diet and lifestyle that helps prevent heart disease was proven to also help reverse it. Until then, it was believed that heart disease progression could only be slowed but not stopped or reversed, similar to how Alzheimer's disease is viewed today. So what if you put people with Alzheimer's on the same plant-based program? You don't know until Dr. Dean Ornish this year put it to the test. A randomized controlled phase 2 clinical trial to see if the progression of Alzheimer's could be slowed, stopped, or perhaps even reversed by randomizing about 50 men and women diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease to either make no lifestyle changes for 20 weeks or to eat a whole food plant-based diet with supplements like vitamin B12, moderate exercise, like walking half an hour a day, stress management, like relaxing with breathing exercises, and getting group support over Zoom. Overall, using what's called the clinical global impression of change scoring, most of the people in the control group kept getting worse, and none showed any improvement. That's typical of Alzheimer's, where you get worse, 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 and you die. But 40% of those in the diet and lifestyle group appear to be getting better within 5 months of eating and living healthier. So in the control group, 100% stayed the same or got worse, whereas in the diet and lifestyle group, 70% stayed the same or got better. Which group would you rather have ended up in? Why did some get better and others not? Well, the more they complied with the recommendations, the greater the beneficial impact on their cognition and function. This helps explain why studies of less intensive lifestyle interventions were not sufficient to stop disease progression, let alone actually improve cognition and function. So, bottom line, plants, and more plants. Any plants in particular? Well, note Loma Linda's Alzheimer's prevention program singles out berries and greens. The main reason greens make it into my anti-aging 8, though, is because of the nitrates in a serving or two of cooked greens can slow our resting metabolic rate. For the same reason, a little shot of beet juice enables free divers to hold their breath longer. It improves the efficiency of our mitochondria, little power plants in our cells, allowing us to effectively extract more energy from each breath. And the candle that burns half as bright burns twice as long. Normally, you only see this kind of metabolic slowing with calorie restriction, but instead of walking around starving all the time, you can just eat a big salad. What else can greens do? On the Harvard Nurses Health Study, the consumption of leafy greens appeared to protect against the development of frailty. And when put to the test in a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, the equivalent of about 2/3 of a cup of spinach led to a significant boost in muscle mass, muscle strength, and muscle quality in older men and women. A single cup of cooked greens worth of vegetable nitrates significantly boosted maximum power and velocity in the quads so much it was functionally equivalent to acutely reversing the effects of several decades of aging. A single cup of cooked greens. Popeye was right about the spinach, not so much the pipe smoking. Anything else to maintain muscle mass other than greens and machines? How about cocoa beans? Older men and women randomized to a single tablespoon of regular cocoa powder a day experienced a significant improvement in muscle mass, muscle strength, and all 4 tests of physical performance. What else can cocoa do? Increase circulation within our skin, boosting it 70% within 2 hours after less than a tablespoon. Do that every day, and within 3 months, you can end up with significantly improved skin thickness, density, and hydration. Keep it up for 6 months, and you see an improvement in wrinkles, all by making your life just a little more chocolatey by adding some natural cocoa powder to your daily diet. I put it in my porridge, my oatmeal, with some canned water-packed tart cherries for a morning time chocolate-covered cherry sensation. What else can we do for our skin? Well, there's certainly other antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, glycotoxin-free foods. So when patients inquire about a diet that might contribute to younger-looking skin, evidence supports the recommendation to follow this whole food, plant-based diet. But the most important thing to prevent skin aging is avoid the sun. Exposure to sunlight may account for up to 90% of visible skin aging, so we should all move up to Stockholm. Check out this trucker who spent years getting more sun on the left side of his face through the driver's side window. So, the gold standard is considered to be the use of sunscreen in the daytime and so-called retinoids at night. They're talking about a prescription-only form of topical vitamin A, known as all-trans-retinoic acid or tretinoin, sold as Retin A, that has been widely proven to improve skin appearance. The only problem is that it may kill you. topical tretinoin therapy and all-cause mortality randomized controlled trial that had to be stopped early because significantly more people were dying in the retinoic acid group compared to the placebo cream group. So what can we use? Topical niacinamide, also known as nicotinamide, has been described as one of the best studied anti-aging skin cream ingredients, which is not saying much, but it has been shown to reduce yellowing, wrinkling, blotchiness, and dark spots in aging facial skin. For example, significantly reducing crow's feet wrinkles around the eyes. This was a split face study in which 64% of the niacinamide side eye wrinkles experienced moderate or marked improvement compared to 0% on the placebo side eyes. Topical vitamin C offers similar improvements over placebo in wrinkles, sourness, skin tone. Unfortunately, vitamin C is unstable in creams, turning it unsightly brown when it oxidizes. So instead, the skincare industry uses more stable vitamin C esters or derivatives, but there's no evidence that these compounds have comparable effects. But the good news is you can just make your own. 10% solution used in the study retails for a ridiculous $127 an ounce. But you can make a DIY solution more than 2,000 times cheaper by simply buying ascorbic acid in bulk and mixing 3 grams into 30 grams of water at a cost of a nickel per ounce, 5 cents. Drip a few drops in the palm of your hand and use your fingers to apply it to your face, neck, and upper chest daily. Just don't get it into your eyes. And look, you can do the same thing with niacinamide, which can be even more ridiculously priced, but you can buy it in bulk as well at a 5,000% discount. I could go on and on. The book certainly does, but let me close out by going back to the basics. From the anti-aging journal Rejuvenation Research, finally, a regimen to extend human life expectancy. Was it some exotic new stem cell treatment or gene therapy? No, it was a reference to this Harvard analysis. More than 100,000 men and women were followed for decades, and just a few basic lifestyle behaviors appeared to translate into 12 to 14 years of extra lifespan for the average 50-year-old. Even at age 50, maybe it'll add an extra dozen years to your lifespan. Even at age 70, there may still be about 10 extra years on the table. And if you clean up your life before age 50, nearly 18 years may be up for grabs based on these simple common sense behaviors, turning back the clock not with a drug or a DeLorean, but just by eating and living more healthfully. A midlife switch between the ages of 45 and 64. To even the barest of minimums, we're talking 5 daily servings of fruits and vegetables, walking even like 20 minutes a day, maintaining a healthy weight and not smoking, can result in a substantial reduction in mortality, even in the immediate future. We're talking a 40% lower risk of dying in the subsequent 4 years. The research conclude that making the necessary changes to adhere to a healthy lifestyle is extremely worthwhile. Middle age is certainly not too late to act. We hold the power. Okay, so I was only able to get to about 100 studies. How Not to Age ended up with over 13,000 citations. So I was only able to cover about 1% of the book. For the other 99%, I encourage you to go to your local public library. And all proceeds I receive from the sales of all my books are all donated directly to charity. I just want you and your loved ones to enjoy the longest, healthiest life. Thank you so much, everybody. Looking forward to answering questions, and happy holiday.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Greger. Very happy to hear from you, and I'm glad that you could join us on your weekend. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect.
Perfectly. Okay. Before we go to the floor for questions, and we have online listeners as well, I wanted to make one comment, and then I'm going to start off with one of my own questions. First of all, you mentioned this Alzheimer's study by Ornish. It's the second time we've talked about the study this weekend.
Oh, great.
And I just want to mention that one of the co-authors is actually Karolinska Institute researcher, well-known, Mia Kivipelto, if you don't know. who that is. Also has done lots of groundbreaking studies on sort of prevention of dementia, and so we have one of our own on that study. You have written another book after How Not to Age, Ozempic, and a book on the GLP-1 weight loss drugs. Dr. Greger, on a visit to the US recently, I had a striking experience with two family members who have achieved remarkable weight loss using GLP-1 agonists. So much so that I almost didn't even recognize one of them by face for standing in front of her. When I asked if she'd consider changing her diet to reduce or eliminate reliance on the drug, she emphatically said, "Oh no." Could you share your general thoughts on these drugs and whether there's any evidence that doctors are successfully or even trying to combine them with lifestyle medicine?
Well, the most important thing to understand is that obesity so dramatically decreases one's lifespan, reducing life expectancy as much as 6 or 7 years, that like bariatric surgery, these GLP-1 agonists should be considered as a last resort for those unwilling or unable to treat the cause of their obesity. The problem, of course, is people eat too much crap. Anything that gets people to eat less crap can be beneficial, but you don't need an expensive drug to decrep your diet or get your internal anatomy rearranged. You know, in a certain sense, it's kind of perverse that, you know, big food addicts people to junk food on purpose for profit and then fattens the coffer of big pharma to treat at high cost and some risk an array of health problems that really need not have occurred in the first place. Again, though, having said that, these are remarkable drugs causing 3 times more weight loss than essentially every other weight loss drug that's ever been approved, at least here in the States. But of course, the majority of those drugs, weight loss drugs, historically have been pulled from the market for becoming public health risks that we didn't know about when they were approved. The first signs of problems didn't occur until after an average of about a decade of use, and weren't actually pulled from the market until after 2 decades. Now, these drugs have the advantage of being used for diabetes for about 20 years. They are, however, being used at a different dose, a different schedule, and in some cases, a different drug like tirzepatide, which is new. So we really don't know what the long-term effects are, but we certainly know what the long-term effects of obesity are, and they are devastating. And so in terms of risk versus benefit, we would really, we could put up with a huge amount of risk if indeed there was no other way people were going to improve their diet.
Thank you. All right, open up to the floor for questions. Oh, we have one.
I just have a quick question. Thanks so much for the talk. It was really interesting. In the early days of veganism, I feel like by default, lots of people were quite healthy because we didn't have much access to vegan options in restaurants, and basically people cooked more whole food, plant-based, not by choice maybe, just because they had to. Are there any studies of vegans and the health declining among vegans because of the availability of more processed vegan food?
Oh, that's such a fantastic question. Yes, for those of us who started eating healthier, 30, 40 years ago, like me, vegans, right, were forced to eat healthy, right? Because what are they going to do? You're in the produce aisle. What else you got? But of course, now there's been sufficient demand that the food industry, of course, is happy to give people any flavor of junk food they want. They want low-fat junk food, they'll give you low-fat junk food. You want low-carb junk food, they'll give you low-carb junk food. Paleo junk food, ironically, they'll give you any kind of junk food you want. So vegan junk food, of course, it's the latest. You can get vegan donuts, you can get the absolute worst food on the planet. And indeed may explain some of the disappointing public health statistics, for example, comparing UK vegans to US vegans. And the reason is because in the UK, the number one reason people give for transitioning towards a more plant-based diet are concerns about animal welfare. Whereas in the States, it's overwhelmingly health. And so the people that are just doing it for the animals or for climate are eating, vegan fish and chips and, vegan donuts. Whereas people who are doing it for health are like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat more fruits and vegetables. And so when you look at the, Adventist II study, which is the largest study of U.S. vegans to date, they have remarkable public health advantages, lower rates of cancer, lower rates of diabetes and hypertension, obesity, et cetera. Whereas if you look at the UK vegans, they don't do as well, and part of that may be because of their increased consumption of ultra-processed foods like soda and potato chips. And so when you look at that, may also explain the reason why sometimes pescatarians do better than vegans in these epidemiological studies. Because when you look at what the pescatarians are actually eating, why would someone go pescatarian? They would go pescatarian primarily because of health. And so what are they doing? They're eating less junk food. And so if you look at how much soda they're drinking, which is kind of a good proxy for kind of junk food, or how little fiber or how much fiber or vitamin C they're eating, which is kind of a good proxy for how much plant foods they're eating, you can see that they're eating more plants than vegans. So ironically, vegans really should be eating more plant-based as well. In fact, there was a study done by Professor T. Colin Campbell's physician's son and daughter-in-law, where they put a group of vegetarians and vegans on a whole food plant-based diet, and they had remarkable health improvements. They lost 10 pounds. Their LDL cholesterol got significantly better. So, yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. It is not enough to minimize animal foods in one's diet. One has to concurrently replace those with whole, healthy plant foods. And if you don't do that, you could either not get the benefits or end up even worse than when you started.
All right, I have a question. We have one question, then a question from the floor. We at Läkare, Framtiden, or Doctors for the Future, we go and meet doctors where they meet, at something called Dagarna. Some of you may have been there, and other sort of medical conferences. So that's the source of where this question comes from. Many healthcare providers struggle with motivating patients to change their diet. What practical advice would you give to clinicians who feel they don't have the time or tools to incorporate nutrition counseling into their practice?
So I'm not sure exactly how the system works there, but for example, doctors you're not doing your own x-rays. You're not doing your own blood draws, right? We are kind of offshoring those tasks to other professionals. And the same thing with nutrition. We don't have to do everything. We should have nutrition professionals in our offices or be able to refer people to nutrition professionals, to good resources, good documentaries and books and websites, so they can learn on their own. So in 10 seconds, right, they can hand somebody a pamphlet, a card, a fact sheet, look here for more information if you're interested in improving your health. So I don't know exactly what the constraints are in terms of how much time you have to talk with the patient, but it really need not take much to really start that dialogue to get people to improve your health. Since, again, it's one of the most critical factors in terms of someone's health and longevity. And so, just like, it's critical to tell people about the risks of smoking, the benefits of smoking cessation is critical to avail people about the power that their diet can have over health. Now, that doesn't mean that people are interested in quitting smoking or improving their diet. It's their body, their choice. As our role as physicians is just to inform people about the predictable consequences of their actions. If you continue to smoke, this is what we would expect. And if you stop smoking, these are the benefits you would expect. And you can talk to people, using this kind of motivational interviewing, about what people's goals are in life. And it's hard to think of any goal that someone could come up with that doesn't involve good health. Even if you want to sit on the couch all day and play video games, you don't want to have a stroke. Your strokes are going to impair your ability to play video games all day. So whatever people are interested in, health is a critical component, and you can help them get there. And these are the tools. And if they're interested, they may be, they may not be. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as people are fully informed about their options, then our job is done, essentially. Just leaving the door open if they want to come back and start to improve their odds of health and longevity.
Thank you. Another question?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Greger. My question is, how does Nutrition Facts research team make sure to avoid paper mill studies?
Oh, critically important. In fact, I have a webinar coming up, How to Read a Research Paper, where I'm going to be talking about these predatory journals. So, it's ironic. There was this whole, this is the whole issue, the whole open source movement, which allowed access, particularly in the global south, to journals, which used to have these high paywalls. But of course, part of that sprung up this predatory underbelly of these journals with and there's just all sorts of funny stories where people, submit these most ridiculous papers and they get published because the peer review is a joke in some of these journals. So there are a number of resources as to lists of predatory journals. There's Beale's list, which is the kind of the famous original list. And so there's ways you can kind of check to make sure that a journal has, kind of a modicum of respect. But yeah, absolutely critically important. There's just so much garbage out there. And, unfortunately, it's kind of like we're left with, the Winston Churchill quote, which is, the democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Same thing. Peer-reviewed medical literature is just the worst way to make decisions about health, except for all the others. It's really the best we have. But there's certainly things we can do to make sure that the sources we cite are not, these fly-by-night predatory journals. Stay tuned for the webinar. It'll be next fall. It's going to be 6 hours. It's going to be a big, deep, in-depth, weekend-long
Thanks.
thing.
Good. Looking forward to that. Another question.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sibylla Jämting. I'm a chairperson for Läkare, för Framtiden. We're very, very happy to have you here. Great. Thanks to you. I have a question. What is the latest about algae oil capsules? Should we eat them if we eat plant-based or not?
I'm sorry. What kind of oil capsules?
Algae oil capsules.
Algae oil?
Oh, algae. Oh, yes. So I encourage those who do not eat fish to consider taking 250 milligrams of pollutant-free. Well, I encourage everyone to get pollutant-free DHA, which is really only found in these algae-based long-chain omega-3s. Your body can convert DHA to EPA. So really just 250 milligrams of DHA in addition to, 2 grams of ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, which is the short chain omega-3 found in plant food. So that's why I recommend a tablespoon of ground flax seeds every day in my daily dozen checklist of healthiest of healthy foods. I encourage people to fit into their daily diet. But yes, particularly not so much for cardiovascular protection, but for cognition, particularly in older men. I encourage 250 milligrams of pollutant-free DHA in people's daily diets, and that's really only accomplished. There used to be a yeast-based source. Cargill used to make it. I don't think that's on the market anymore. So now there's just algae-based sources.
Thank you.
And a follow-up on the same topic. So would this be all right to use the algae omega-3 oils as a substitute for, say, ground flaxseed if somebody has problems digesting?
Ooh, no, I'd like to see both. It doesn't have to be flaxseed. It can be hemp seeds, it can be chia seeds, it can be walnuts. There's lots of ways you can get your ALA. But flax seeds don't just have the omega-3s, but they have those anti-cancer lignans, which are important for for breast cancer prevention. And so there's other benefits. Lots of soluble viscous fiber. So I'd like people to do both. But if for whatever reason they can't, there's other ways to get lignans. Sesame seeds are kind of a second best source.
Good. Okay. Any other questions from the floor? Scanning the room here. I think everybody's mulling their questions. Oh, we have one.
Yes, hello. Thank you for a nice talk. I'm a nutritionist and a doctor myself, and if I'm not wrong, the Swedish food authorities recommend that we don't eat ground flax seeds at all because of the risk of, is it cyanide? Yes.
Cyanide toxicity. Yes, I remember vividly giving a talk in Stockholm and someone saying, wait a second, our government says you shouldn't eat flax seeds. And so because of that event, I went and did a whole series of videos talking about just that issue. So if you type in cyanide and flax seeds into nutritionfacts.org, all those videos will come up. And so I talk about the Swedish government and where they arrived and where they made the mistake. And so I encourage people to I think it's a 3-video series. So you can make up your own mind.
Yeah, I think the recommendation is now not more than 1 tablespoon cooked ground flax seeds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's an improvement.
Yeah.
Going in the right direction. All right, scanning the room. Otherwise, I have a question. Come on, think the questions through, and then we'll... we have 8 minutes left anyway. So, Dr. Greger, I have a question about artificial intelligence. Hot topic, as you know. As this technology continues to advance, how do you see AI shaping the future of nutrition science? Could AI help uncover new dietary patterns, personalized nutrition recommendations, or even design better or more effective patient interventions? And are you aware of any promising studies or applications, or have you come across anything interesting in this area?
My only experience with AI nutrition has been using research tools. So there used to be a nonprofit called Elicit, which is kind of an AI research assistant. There's another one called SciSpace, both of which I found to be useful in terms of searching the literature. But I have not found success in getting them to summarize papers or pull out key points, so I have not found it useful on the research side other than to find papers I couldn't find otherwise. So I definitely, if you're looking at some obscure topic and you can't find any papers, I would definitely look up those 2 sources, and they pull up papers just when you think you know everything about a topic. It'll pull up some obscure things that just aren't listed in PubMed, the National Library of Medicine, from some obscure nursing journal or from chemistry journal, some other database you can't get access to. So that's really what I found most useful. In terms of research, I think much of personalized nutrition is just kind of scammy ways to bilk people out of money. I mean, there's certain things like, some people metabolize caffeine faster than other people. Some people are lactose intolerant. I mean, there certainly are genetic differences. But in general, foods are, so some foods may be, better for some people than others, but it's not like there are people like a food is good for some people and bad for other people. It's just usually degrees of goodness or badness. And so I only see those kind of personalized nutrition tools as motivators. Like, I mean, if the only way you're going to eat your greens is to have someone swab your cheek and give you some fancy readout with flashing lights that says, oh, based on your, your genetics or your whatever, you need to eat dark green leafy vegetables every day. And the person will all of a sudden start eating greens and they would not have otherwise. Then okay, you could argue that it's worth spending lots of money to get people to eat their greens, but they should have just been eating their greens. There's no reason to, everybody needs to.
Understood.
Frankly.
Thanks. Okay. Sibylla?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. A lot of people here drink diet sodas, Diet Coke. What is your view on that? And also with the greens, is it okay to have it in a smoothie or not? I think Dr. Assistant says we have to chew them. What is your view about this?
And so there have been there's a large body of data suggesting ultra processed foods are bad for people, but if you actually drill down, like in the EPIC study or some of the big Harvard cohorts where you have a big enough study to actually see which subclasses of ultra processed foods are bad, there's really only 3 in terms of mortality, and that's sugar sweetened beverages as well as artificially sweetened beverages, and then third is ultra processed meat, such as burgers and hot dogs and chicken nuggets and fish sticks. So those are really the only 3 classes associated with higher mortality in the latest meta-analysis of ultra-processed foods. Why are artificial sweeteners so bad? We think it's through the microbiome. So, like the sucralose industry, Splenda, likes to brag that their artificial sweetener is not absorbed into the system and therefore is safe. It's not absorbed into the bloodstream. But, well, what does that mean? What that means is it makes its way all the way down to the colon and can muck with our microbiome. And that may explain why you see the metabolic disturbances with a variety of artificial sweeteners, both natural and artificial. So we're talking stevia and monk fruit and aspartame, which is now considered a possible carcinogen by the IARC. And so so we think it's a microbiome effect in terms of mucking with our metabolism, and I would encourage people to use whole food sources of sweeteners such as date powder, which is just powdered dates. It's a whole plant food. You can use it to sweeten beverages or anything. Then you actually get some nutrition, and you're not dealing with some of those questionable food additives. And then in terms of smoothies, so one of the reasons we should eat our dark green leafy vegetables is because of this really fascinating cycle in which our body produces nitric oxide from the vegetable nitrates we eat, using in part these facultative bacteria on our tongue. Dr. Esselstyn suggested that by blending things in a smoothie, we somehow lose that. That doesn't make any sense to me. It still hits your tongue. And it doesn't matter. You could even take an NG tube and get it down your stomach. Your body still recycles, takes all those nitrates, dumps it in your salivary glands to put it on your tongue to make those. So you could get a rectal infusion of greens and still get the nitrates right where we want them. In fact, you actually improve the bioavailability of critical, vision protecting nutrients like lutein when you blend greens. So something like pesto or green smoothie or some kind of broccoli or spinach soup or something would be a particularly good way to get your greens nutrients, which are so important for brain health and eye health and cardiovascular endothelial health.
All right.
Hi, Michael Gregor. Thanks for an amazing speech. I was also part of the audience when you were speaking in Stockholm. I think it was 7 years ago. So anyway.
Oh, great!
Anyhow, I wonder about if you can explain more about the specific side effects about Ozempic, because from what I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to get approved, they only tested the company has only tested it for 6 years. Am I wrong about that? And that you might not see the long-term consequences beyond that, or is it 10 years? I don't know. But can you talk about more about the side effects of Ozempic?
So the longest study to date on GLP-1 agonists for weight loss has only been 4 years, but they've been on the market, at least here in the States, for 2 decades, because they were used originally, not Ozempic, which was not approved till more recently, but the first GLP-1 agonists were approved more than 2 decades ago. So we have experience with this class of medications, but these are new medications used at different doses than they were before for diabetes. And so the concern is that some side effects will rise later on. We're particularly concerned about pancreatic cancer because of not only studies on laboratory animals, but studies on accident victims who are on these. There's who died while on these drugs, and all their pancreases had abnormalities. They're concerned about thyroid cancer, concerned about bowel obstruction, concerned about pancreatitis. But these things like pancreatitis, bowel obstruction, less than 1% per year risk, and these longer-term cancer risk. If you're worried about cancer, then what you should really be worried about is obesity. Right? Obesity increases the risk of at least 6 cancers. So if you're like, I don't want to get cancer, well then, reducing your body weight is one of your most powerful tools to do that. Now, one thing people misunderstand though is that, I talked a little bit before about the kind of cost benefits, because obesity is so devastating, you'd accept almost any risk, even if a drug, shaved a few years off your life. But that's assuming that these drugs cure obesity, which they don't. On average, in all the trials that have been done so far, people start out obese and they end up obese. When the drug stops working after a year, the weight loss stalls after a year. Every single trial done to date. So the 4-year trial, they lost weight during the first year, but then not a pound more on average over the subsequent 3 years, even though they're injecting the drugs every day. So then they get no further weight loss, no further benefit. And they're just dealing with the risks. You can understand why people stop taking these drugs. In fact, most people here in the States stop taking these drugs within 2 months because of the short-term gastrointestinal side effects like nausea and vomiting. 80% stop within the first 6 months. And so, the adverse effects are certainly something that are impairing the ability for people to stay on these drugs. But of course, if you stop taking these drugs, you would regain that initial weight loss. And so there are benefits of being less obese, even though it doesn't cure obesity. Only about 1 in 25 people achieve a normal weight on these drugs. Having said that, less than 1 in 100 people who are obese without these drugs eventually get to a normal weight or without bariatric surgery. So again, it's like any lifestyle drugs. So you talk about statins or blood pressure lowering medications. These drugs, if you're unwilling to lower your sodium for high blood pressure, or lower your saturated fat intake for your cholesterol, then these drugs can absolutely be life-saving. But they have risks. So statins have increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Wouldn't it be nice to have an intervention that lowers your risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes? You can do that with a healthy enough diet. But again, if you're unwilling to do diet, statins can be life-saving. And these drugs, although we actually don't have all-cause mortality benefit for Ozempic for primary prevention, there are studies showing that for those with pre-existing cardiovascular disease, these drugs can decrease risk of subsequent events because they cause so much weight loss. So again, it's a complicated picture. That is why I wrote a book about it. You can get it on audiobook, ebook, paperback, and I just drill down and go deep on all the risks and benefits so people can make up their own mind.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And now to Jana Mettu.
Thank you so much, everybody. Hopefully I will be there in person soon.
Dr. Greger, bye-bye.